pick up there in number 4 here. So one of the things that's going to move things along, after these two things that get our asterisks, that get us thinking, oh, hey, either if we're Southerners, it gets us thinking, oh, hey, the North all want to what? What does the South think that the North all want to do after John Brown? Kill, but otherwise, more importantly,
In slavery?
end slavery immediately, right? So immediately and violently, okay? They think that the North wants to end slavery immediately and violently. Does the North want to end slavery immediately and violently? What?
Immediately, but...
No, neither. The North does not want to end slavery violently, and the North does not actually want to end slavery immediately, okay? The Northerners, the vast majority of Northerners who want to end slavery want to end it legally and permanently, okay? Now, to do it legally, how do we have to do that?
You have to, put it to the president and, get all these, doesn't, take a long time.
Yeah, it takes a long time because it's not the, yeah?
The Constitution.
You have to amend the Constitution, right? So how long does that take? How do you get to amending the Constitution? Yeah.
2/3.
You need 2/3 of Congress. How do you get 2/3 of Congress to be anti-slavery?
I forgot what I was raising my hand.
Okay. So we've mentioned this a few times. How do you end slavery? We need to get 2/3. You guys are right on. You're right on track. We need to get 2/3 of Congress to want to end slavery. How do you get a Congress where 2/3 of them want to end slavery? Yes, Jonathan?
New territories.
There you go. The new territories. Every time you add a new state, it has to be a free state. So stop the spread of slavery, and you'll stop slavery. That's how the Northerners that want to end slavery, that's how they want to end slavery. Now, do all Northerners want to end slavery? No. But why do more Northerners want to end slavery than any before? What is it that makes Northerners want to end slavery? Oh, Claire? Uncle Tom's Cabin. Good. So that's our other asterisk. The thing that changes the Northerners' understanding of slavery is this popular cultural work, this novel, this story that helps them identify with characters and realize, man, that's really horrible, and that's in our own country, and so there are increasingly more that want to end it, but the most popular view on how to end it is the legal and permanent ending of slavery. Yes, sir.
So you know how there was two sides to the British wanting with the whole Revolutionary War.
There are two sides to the British.
There are two sides, how the British saw and how we saw.
Yes, sure.
I'm wondering if there are two sides to this whole slavery story, if they aren't giving the full story in the textbooks, or are they?
Okay, so what do you mean by that? Like an argument in favor of slavery?
Maybe they're taking really good care of the slaves and just in return for some work, and then the textbooks are making it seem really bad.
Yeah. Right. So maybe we're not getting a good depiction of what slavery was like. Maybe Uncle Tom's Cabin was biased, right? Certainly was. So Harriet Beecher Stowe was from a very strong abolitionist family. It's kind of funny because in theology too, we're not studying this at all in there, but yet in our reading we read about her father, Harriet Beecher Stowe's father, Lyman Beecher, in our reading on the Second Great Awakening. This is kind of interesting, but so she's from a strong abolitionist family. Maybe she's got the facts skewed. I don't think that I don't think that they are. I think that this is one of the things about slavery as it existed in America that made it so appalling, is that the way that slavery went down here was a really horrible form of slavery. So defenses of slavery saying, hey, the Bible doesn't ever condemn slavery, and defenses of slavery from saying like a master could treat their slave really well, and you could have a benevolent slavery. You could, in theory, right? And I believe the Bible would have room for a benevolent slavery. In fact, that's exactly how the Bible describes our relationship with our Lord. That word, Lord, kurios, means master. And his relationship to us, his doulos, slaves or bondservants, right? That's how God describes our relationship with him. God's the best master to have, right? You want to be owned by God. He purchased us with his own blood. That's what redemption, when you hear the terms redemption, God purchased us. He bought us out of slavery to sin into slavery to himself, because that's where you want to be. That's where freedom is, right? Freedom is in submitting yourself to his reign and to his rule. So, yes, that's possible. Is it possible among human beings, one human being who is equal in nature to another human being, to own them and treat them benevolently? Not nearly so. I am. We should all be immediately suspect of that idea, because what it inevitably looks like is exactly what it looked like in this country. Our country was so far from that idea because it was exclusive to one race. It said, hey, this one race is only ever going to be enslaved. And there wasn't anything benevolent about the treatment of slaves. Even the best treated slaves by their owners were still treated much more poorly. We're still oppressed, is what I need to say, by their masters. So yeah, yes, there were examples in Roman culture and slavery where a slave is basically a member of the household, where a slave could be treated like a son or a daughter. Yeah, absolutely. But it just didn't happen in this country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, like, we're living in this politically correct world, and there's obviously some bias, but, I know that slavery is wrong, but maybe I was just, well, like you said, it was totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, and that doesn't mean that there aren't biased presentations of the material, right? So, like, my experience and my understanding of things growing up in the North, and I still, because I grew up in the North, I still have I still talk about us and them, and sometimes I still catch myself talking about the South as a them, and, my students sometimes catch me and be like, wait, them is us, right? And then I'm like, dude, grammar. But anyway, which the grammar would be fine then, but anyway, them is we. We is them. Anyway, sorry. I just lost my train of thought because it sounded so funny. But yeah, it's easy for me as a Northerner to say, oh, yeah, the South were clearly wrong because they had slaves, and all the Southerners were these horrible slave mongers. Remember what percentage of the South actually owned slaves? It's a very small percent, right? And among those, a very small percent that actually owned more than just a couple of them, right? So, and remember what's making slave ownership so lucrative for these slave owners, and a lot of it is Northern industry. So while the North is sitting there saying like, oh, you guys shouldn't have slaves, and we're so much more enlightened that we don't have slavery. Well, we're paying our employees pennies, and they're living in abject poverty, and we don't care at all about their starving in and freezing to death in the slums in the city because we're paying them and they're free. Right, never mind the fact that we're paying them way less than, we're not paying fair wages, we're working children, and, by the way, we're also benefiting from the free labor of the South by all the cotton that we're producing in our factories. So the North doesn't come out, stainless in this whole discussion, but you're right, there are presentations of it that are very biased against the North that say, the North was right and the South was wrong. And that was, growing up, that was always very easy for me to say. Now, luckily, my dad was a huge Civil War buff, and I don't know anybody who knows more about the Civil War than my father, and he would have been very quick to correct me if I ever said something like that. He just always knew better. But, yeah.
So, how did the South split up if only like a small percent of slaves owners?
Right, because that small percent had all the power in the South. Yeah. Yeah, it was that small percent that were all the congressmen and senators and all these things, right? They were all planters. Yeah, that some of the biggest plantations were owned by some. When you learn about the Confederate States, Robert E. Lee, for example, owned a huge plantation in Virginia. He was a big time planter. Jefferson Davis. Now there's some names that aren't household names, but back then they were, and those are a lot of the guys that are calling all the shots. And so they're either actually congressmen, governors, state congressmen, or they're putting money in those guys' pockets. But that very small percentage of the population are pulling all the strings in society. That's why.
Yeah, so it's kind of like people saying that, like when one Christian sins, they say that all Christians are absolutely horrible, but it's really just like when one Christian acts like when one guy who claims to be a Christian does something horrible,
Yeah.
but really a majority of Christians don't do stuff like that.
Yeah. So the planters did speak on behalf of the whole South, right? But they don't actually. That, like, what they said happened, but that doesn't mean that all Southerners actually were like the planters. So yeah, and it doesn't mean that all Northerners were these humanitarian people that wanted to, seek out the equal treatment of all other humans. We need to get one thing straight. Just because many Northerners become anti-slavery doesn't mean that Northerners aren't racist anymore. Okay, and so there's a deeper seated problem than just slavery. Now, slavery is a problem, and so the ending of it is going to be a benefit, but it's not going to make it if the deeper seated problem under it, the racist problem, doesn't go away, then free African Americans are going to experience many of the same problems that enslaved African Americans experienced. And that's exactly the history but we're getting ahead of ourselves, so let's talk about 1858. 1858 is a midterm election year, okay? And midterm elections are elections between presidential elections. And so between presidential elections, some senators, if their 6-year terms are up, that you have senatorial elections for them, all representatives are elected or reelected because they're every 2 years, right? So every midterm election is going to be all your state representatives are voted on, and maybe one of your senators. Okay, and so in 1858, you have Illinois has a senatorial. That means election of a senator. A senatorial election. And in this election, you have two candidates, and one of those candidates is a household name. Everybody knows this guy. They're just like, hey, yeah, oh yeah, that guy, totally. Right? And then there's another guy that's like, what? Who's that guy? That's a nobody. That's a no name. Okay, never heard of the guy. How do you even pronounce it? Right? So, as you might have guessed, the one that we all know, the household name here, the one that's just super popular and kind of a shoe-in, is Stephen Douglas. Right? Stephen Douglas, we're like, yeah, oh, duh, Stephen Douglas. Come on, that guy. Clearly. Now, he ran against this fresh off the farm, no-name fella named Abraham. Let me see if I get the spelling right here, because there's a silent L in there. Yeah, Lincoln. Okay? Abraham Lincoln. So, yeah, you don't pronounce the L. Well, the second one. Pronounce the first one. Abraham Lincoln. You all got that name down? Good. Because nobody's heard of this guy, right? He is completely fresh off the farm. Stephen Douglas is the shoe-in. Everybody knows that guy. Yes, sir?
Is that 1880, 1850, or
1858.
1838?
I thank you. Thanks for making it multiple choice, though. It always helps. 1858. That does look like a 3. I don't disagree with you on that. Now, you might think I'm being sarcastic, but at this time in history, Stephen Douglas was a household name in Illinois, at least. Okay, Stephen Douglas was well known, and it was Abraham Lincoln who nobody had ever heard of. Okay, so if I was to say to you, if I was to say the name Daisy Ridley. Oh, yeah. Daisy Ridley. Does anybody know who Daisy Ridley is?
No.
Oh, Michael knows who Daisy Ridley is. Anybody else?
No.
Yeah? Daisy Ridley?
Really? Is it like the BB gun person?
No, it's not. That's a good guess, though.
Star Wars,
Yeah. So,
Oh, it's right.
yeah, Daisy Ridley plays Rey in the new Star Wars movie. So here's the thing: she is not a household name by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, she's not a household name. But I guarantee you, before the Force was awakened a few years ago, if I asked a room full of 7th graders, "Hey, who's Daisy Ridley?" nobody would know who she was. She, before this, like, unless you lived in Australia and watched TV commercials, maybe. I'm assuming she did some maybe commercial acting or something. I don't know. I don't even know, because I had to look her up, right? I was like, oh, who might be? Oh, maybe that girl that plays Rey. And then I had to practice. I had to try several different spellings of Rey in Google before I arrived at Rey from Star Wars, and I was like, oh, there she is. And then last period, I called her Daisy Ripley. So this is how unknown this girl is, and yet she has kind of a big break, right? She's in kind of a movie that's kind of a big deal, and she's in 2 of them now, actually, right? So suddenly, some people have heard of her. Okay. But what if I say the name Taylor Swift, then I don't have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to recognize that name, right? I can say Taylor Swift and everybody knows Taylor Swift. Now Taylor Swift is so far ago, I don't know what the moment was where she became recognizable, right? I don't know what the moment was where she became a household name, or what event caused that. Probably some sort of relationship or something like that she had, and definitely a breakup involved, or I don't know, right? I just know that when I say that name, even if you haven't ever listened to a song by her, you certainly have heard her name and know who I'm talking about, right? And so Stephen Douglas was the Taylor Swift on the scene. Okay, Abraham Lincoln was the Daisy Ridley, like the pre-Force Awakens Daisy Ridley, all right? Now, Lincoln clearly is going to become the Taylor Swift, right? And the thing that makes him a Taylor Swift is is a series of debates that Lincoln and Douglas are going to have during this election. Okay, and so.
Diabetes?
Debates. I'm just gonna retry that whole word. There we go. So what these debates do is they draw out the positions on slavery. Okay, the subject matter is slavery because this is what's at stake. All right, and so Stephen Douglas's approach to slavery is popular sovereignty. Right? He's just saying, hey, each territory needs to decide for itself whether it's going to be a free state or a slave state. Okay? What Lincoln does in these debates is he really kind of nails Douglas down and says, wait a second, Douglas, I know what you're doing here. You're trying to remove yourself from the situation. You're trying to say, hey, it's not up to me. And so you can try to satisfy the people who think slavery is evil and satisfy the people who think slavery is okay. And by saying, hey, I'm just going to leave it up to those guys and somebody else gets to make the decision. So what Lincoln makes Douglas do and how he says it is, it comes down to this. Is slavery wrong or is it right? And I and the Republican Party think it wrong. That's what he says. Right? That there is this is the position that I'm approaching is slavery is wrong. And if it's wrong, then it's incumbent on the government itself to do something about that wrong. Okay? We don't get to back up and say, I wash my hands of this situation, I'll let whatever happens happens. Okay? And so he lets it be known that he is an anti-slavery candidate. Now, this does not mean the first anti-slavery senator candidate, okay? Because while nobody had heard of Lincoln in 1858 when he ran against Stephen Douglas, he comes out of this debate, and because of what happens in these debates and in this whole election, he comes out as the Taylor Swift of American politics, okay? And so what happens in 1860 then? Yeah.
His assassination.
No. Jump the gun a little bit there. Yep.
Becomes president.
Yeah, he's going to be elected president in 1860, okay? Because of the popularity that he gains here during this senator election. So he loses this election for senator, okay? But, hey, that's cool because he wins the election in 1860, okay? So let's mark down here in this space that remains what we want to do here. We're writing it down so it's written down somewhere, but we all know this already, right? That how we end slavery is we stop the spread of slavery. Stop the spread of slavery. That's how you end slavery. Lincoln is not an abolitionist. Okay? Lincoln wants to end slavery. He's not an abolitionist who wants to abolish slavery in the sense of just yanking slaves out of the hands of the Southerners. He doesn't want to stop slavery immediately. He wants to stop it legally and permanently. And the way that you do that is by stopping its spread. The way that you legally end slavery is by outnumbering pro-slavery congressmen 2-1 and amending the Constitution, right? So we've been over that over and over and over again, but I can't emphasize that enough, that that's how things have to get done in order for them to be legal and permanent. Now, there's nothing to say that the government can't just like shake things up and and break its own rules to do something if it finds them urgent enough. And that's what the abolitionists are saying should happen. Lincoln is saying, no, you cause more problems by doing that. I know it's an urgent problem, but things that are quickly done can be quickly undone, right? So we want to pursue a legal and permanent solution. So stop the spread of slavery, and we'll end slavery. Okay, everybody, we all got that?
Yeah.
All right. So Lincoln is elected in 1860. That. And so, what is the South think that Lincoln wants to do?
Destroy slavery.
Yeah, they think that he wants to destroy slavery. Yeah, Jonathan?
Abolish slavery and he's trying to pull the South back to the Union.
Yeah. What makes it so that the South thinks that Lincoln wants to yank their slaves out of their hands? Why do they think that he wants to do that? Jonathan?
Because of the debates, they figured that anti-slavery means abolitionists.
They think anti-slavery means abolish immediately. Why do they think that anti-slavery means abolish immediately? What makes them think that? So absolutely, the debates let them know Lincoln is anti-slavery. But why do they think that everybody who's anti-slavery wants to immediately end slavery? Trev? Yeah. What?
I don't know.
What changes the South's understanding of what the North wants to do? I'll give you a hint. If it's changing somebody's understanding of something, it has an asterisk on your handout.
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
What makes the South think that anti-slavery means abolish immediately? Luke?
John Brown.
John Brown, right? John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry because his idea was put guns in the hands of slaves and they'll get themselves free immediately, right? They'll create the moment that releases them. So John Brown puts this sort of bad taste in all the Southern's mouth, as if they needed a bad taste for anti-slavery. But gives them the impression, North is full of a bunch of John Browns. And so they think that in 1860, our country has just elected a John Brown into office. Like, how bad would that be? Like, that would be your worst nightmare coming true. Furthermore, you guys saw all the candidates on the ballot for 1860 election, right? How many were there?
2.
Four. Now, Bell is not a serious contender on there, but most of the votes are going to be split 3 ways between Breckinridge and Bell. To be able to get himself on there means he has a significant number of supporters. But the votes are going to be split. Most of the votes are going to be split 3 ways between Breckinridge, Douglas, and Lincoln. And so the Northern vote mostly is going to be split between Douglas and Lincoln. The Southern vote is going to be predominantly Breckinridge, but because of that, because there are so many candidates on there, it becomes possible that Lincoln can actually be elected and never have appeared on some Southern ballots. So there's some Southerners that show up to vote, and they see these names on here, and they say, oh, here are my options, and they check a name, and they go home, and they find out, Abraham Lincoln, wait, I didn't even see him on my ballot. How did he become president? Because he failed to even gain nomination in certain districts, or however it ends up that such is the case. He is his name isn't even on some Southern ballots. So this, without my even knowing he was an option, suddenly John Brown is elected into office, and he wants to take away all my slaves, and this gets people fired up, right? So, if it's time to act very Southern, okay, if the North has done something very anti-Southern and the South wants to do something really, really Southern, who's going to show up to let everybody know how Southern they are first? Eau Claire? South Carolina. Remember our middle brother? Our middle brother that needs everybody to know that they're Southern? Hey, I'm Southern too, everybody look at me!
Well, they're neglected.
Right, because they're so easily ignored. Right, yeah, we get it. We know. But, so South Carolina is going to secede. In December of 1861. And another chunk of states will secede along with South Carolina. Okay, so to secede means to break off. All right, it means to break off from the Union, and so remember this assumes a certain kind of understanding of what a state is. All right. And remember that the technical political definition of a state is basically the same as a country. Okay, a state has its own government. It's its own independent sovereign entity. It can rule itself and it can function independently. It's just that these United States happen to be these states that have leagued together, that have allied together into a confederacy together. Now, the understanding of Washington and the understanding of the North is, hey, no, with the Constitution, we've combined to become one nation, one country. Right? We're a country of states, but we're one country, and that's what the Constitution does. The South doesn't all share that definition of what the United States are. And so in no ways are they going to understand that. They're going to say, no, we're only in this country as long as we want to be in this country. Otherwise, we are our own state, and we can just break off and be our own state. Right? And if that's what we can be, you better believe South Carolina is going to be the first ones to be that. Right? They're like, yeah, we're seceding. We're going to look at us. Now they're shooting up in the air when they're not shooting at people yet. But when they do that, they break off and they're like, we're going to be our own thing. And remember, notice what language they return to. Notice what kind of language they pick up to describe themselves again. Because what do they call themselves? What do they call their country that they make when they secede? The Confederate States of America. Remember when last time we saw confederation? What does confederation mean? When was the last time we saw the language of confederation? Who?
England.
No. This was after England, just right after England. The first document that we wrote up for our own government was the Articles of Confederation. Right? Confederation literally means allied together. Okay? And it's that definition of states as a bunch of different countries that are allied together. It's the firm league of friendship. That's the language that the Articles of Confederation define. So the My Little Pony model of government is going to be reappropriated by these Confederate states. They're going to say, we're just a bunch of independent nations that are firmly, we share together the elements of harmony. Okay? Friendship is magic. All right? So, when they do that, they break off and they make their own little friendship league. And now, when they break off, there are sprinkled throughout the South, there are a bunch of military bases, right? Those military bases are not the property of the state. They're not private property. Those are federal property. Those belong to the United States Army. And so Lincoln says, hey, you guys, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to, if you guys have broken off, I might dispute your ability to do so. I'm not going to come down and attack you. But you have broken off, but I still have military bases down there. And those are still my soldiers there. And so I'm going to still supply those soldiers that are my soldiers that have remained loyal to me. Now, a lot of soldiers in the South are going to not remain loyal to the Union and are just going to join. And those bases are just going to be overrun by those Southerners, and they're going to be they're just going to become Southern bases. But there are military bases in the South sprinkled throughout there where there are Union soldiers that remain loyal to the Union. They're U.S. soldiers, right? So they're going to stay part of the U.S. Army. And Lincoln says, I'm going to supply those people. Now, what does the South hear when he says, I'm going to supply my soldiers in these military bases?
We're going to supply ours with more.
What?
We're going to supply ours with more.
Well, what do they hear when they hear him say that? What? Yeah.
I'm gonna get them ready for war.
Yeah, I'm getting them ready for war. Like the question is, well, what do they need supplies for, Lincoln? Why are you sending supplies to them? Do you think we're going to attack, or are you trying to attack us? And so the place where this kind of comes to a head is in Charleston Harbor. Charleston Harbor is a very old harbor named for King Charles, Charlestown, okay? And it's in South Carolina, Carolingian, Charles, right? So everything's named after Charles down here. But this harbor kind of looks like this, and it has this island right there in the middle of the mouth of the harbor, okay? And there's a military base here. And here's a little cannon. And there's a military base here. There's a little cannon. And then there's a military base right here, right? Okay? So that ships coming in and out, they have to go by this island, and they're pretty well covered by fire going in and out of that harbor. It's a very secure harbor because of this island. Now, there's that military base on the island is called Fort what?
Sumter.
Fort Sumter. And so these military bases are overrun by Southerners. They're not Union bases, and the South just occupies those bases. These are Union soldiers who remain loyal to the U.S. Army, and they're U.S. Army soldiers. And Lincoln has sent ships there to supply them with goods. And the South says, "Oh no, you don't. You stay away from that island." And so when Lincoln goes to send them supplies, they fire on Fort Sumter. Okay, Fort Sumter, I believe, 3 levels high. 2 levels are completely annihilated. Right? There's 1 level of it that still stands and that was left standing after it. No casualties in this. They hunker down and they're all protected from it. But the result is the Civil War. Right? This is where war breaks out. So while South Carolina secedes, and by the way, not just South Carolina, but all here, when South Carolina secedes, all of these states down here are all going to secede with South Carolina, this southern band. Notice what Big Brother et al. are holding strong, right? Because we're going to think this out. We want to be reasonable about this. We don't want to overthink. We don't want to overreact. Okay, oldest brother is a lot more stable and secure. So older brother's waiting it out until April of 1861. guess when Fort Sumter happened? April of 1861, right? So that's why Virginia waits until then. Virginia waits until they can't not secede. They can't not secede. Like they pretty much have to secede, right? Once there's a war, and so they secede December. Oh, yeah, December 1860. Sorry, guys. It's still that year. Fort Sumter happens in April 1861, and then Virginia and the rest.
How does Virginia secede in December of 1860? If Fort Sumter happens in 1861.
Wait, no. Virginia doesn't secede in 1860. South Carolina and these states, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, all of these states secede because Lincoln is elected, right? So Lincoln's election is what sets these off, okay? The second chunk, these purple states, they secede after Fort Sumter. So both of them have an event that leads to their secession, but they're different. They're separated by several months. Notice this little yellow group here. All right. Notice that we have what are called border states. That there are southern Union states. Okay, these are southern states that remain in the Union. They're below our Mason-Dixon line and our squiggly Ohio River, and then you got your Missouri over there. But they never do secede. They don't join the Confederacy. So they're still Southern, and so we do need to have a category in our mind that Southern and Confederate are not the same thing. Growing up Yankee, I never knew that distinction. I just didn't. That wasn't on my radar. But that we need to have a category for that. And by the way, West Virginia doesn't exist before this, right? So West Virginia is one of those border states because it becomes a thing. It breaks off for the purpose of remaining part of the Union. Yes?
Sorry, but do you want to move it so I can write it down real quick?
Not at all. Yes?
What does it say after 1860 with the S?
Fort Sumter? Yeah, you mean this little square? That's Fort.
Yeah, because it's a fort
Yeah, it was a picture of a fort.
with an F and a T.
Fort Sumter.
But is that the same story with Fort
What's
Worth?
after the
Which means
FA?
face
The VA?
VA, sorry, Virginia.
Virginia and others secede. And the rest.
Okay.
Virginia and the rest.
It actually
1861.
So that would be Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee,
Texas.
Arkansas,
Virginia and the East.
And
the rest.
Oh.
Right? Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Is that it? Yes, that's it. See them all here? So Lincoln's election causes these to secede. Fort Sumter causes these to secede. These never secede. Right? Why is it really super ridiculously important that Maryland not secede? Why is that kind of a big deal?
Capital right there.
Yeah, the capital of the Union is in Maryland. Now, technically, it's in its own district, but it's surrounded by Maryland, and it's already going to be right across the river from Virginia. But if otherwise, it would be completely surrounded then by Confederate by the Confederacy. So it's fortuitous that Maryland remained loyal to the Union. All right, cool. Anything else that I need to mention really quickly? I don't think so.